Hi, I'm Edgar.
And I'm Paul Allen.
And welcome back to the brush for the December special episode. And given that this is the December special episode, I need to make sure I have my medication. Thankfully, my dad came down and passed on some humbugs for me so that I stay safe and well during Christmas. Okay.
We're in the month of December.
I think I survived that one.
So, as we discussed in the last episode, I am going to have a go with Ed's new brush.
That's my old brush. This is my new brush. I'm painting with my brush. So the Raphael 8404 versus two cheap nasty paintbrushes.
Yeah. So we've got two of the same lady. I'm going to assume waiting for the train set, I think.
Yeah.
Waiting for a train. She's got a nice purse. I've brought my own paint with me, but I'm going to be using Ed's brushes. So I'm going to do one first with the standard brushes, as I call it.
Yeah, normal brushes.
Normal.
And while he paints that, I will be painting some Frostgrave Knolls. Some of the Frostgrave stuff, there seems to be someone splitting up the boxes and selling them sprue by sprue. You usually get 4 sets of the sprue in a box, but someone's selling them sprue by sprue. And I thought, I don't necessarily want, what is it, 20 or 40 in a box. I don't necessarily want that many, but I want to have a few Knolls knocking about just to have the option of having a different character type or monster type if you want.
Oh,
So
this brush is awful.
Straight away, immediately seeing, and this is the problem I've been having with these brushes. You just immediately know from picking it up that it's kind of a bad brush.
You touch it and it sort of just bends off at some angle instead of applying the paint.
Yeah, so, as if we haven't done the introduction properly, this is Back to the Brush, the podcast where we talk about our miniature painting forays and how we've returned to the hobby after many years of being away. And today, because it is a special episode, we're recording in person and doing some active painting while we do it.
We'll be taking the 10 best photos, most important to the video photos, and placing on our Instagram. So you'll be able to see what I just said, oh my god, at, because this is going to be awful.
Yep, so link in the description to the Instagram post. In other topics we will be talking about today, we will discuss, of course, some of the models that we've been working on recently. We have quite an interesting selection. And because we've got this big setup, we only have one main topic for today's episode, and that will be making your own bases.
And ruining pre-built ones.
So, shall we pop up some of the models that we've been working on recently? Do you need to grab some models?
Yeah, let me just see.
Because I just realised I have also left the models that I need to show off on the other side of the room. Try and put some highlights in.
I haven't got there yet. I'm just doing the base colours.
Maybe just on whatever section you're working on, try to put some highlights in just to see what it's like doing highlights on this kind of model.
I've got a plan.
He's got a plan.
So, the end of last month, I believe we had some static shots of my Fallout models when they arrived.
Yeah, I think it was just in the box.
Yeah, so I've been working on some of these. Look, a cat hair. What a surprise.
Cat hairs everywhere.
So, unfortunately, these are a bit bland because I decided to go with the Enclave set. So they're all just kind of black and silver. But there you go.
Yeah, black and covered in power armor.
Yeah. So the one base that we're going to talk about is this one. So the release agent on these models was absolutely evil. So I took them all out of the packaging, glued the models up together, stuck them in a warm soapy water as I do normally, just went over them with a brush, left them to dry out overnight and primed them, and the primer came off. So I paint stripped them. So for example,
the whole point of primer being that.
So this was the first one I did, which is not finished being painted yet, but this is like the Fallout New Vegas one. So the paint just you touch the model and bits would come away on your hand. So I use a paint stripper called Eco Strip. Now this stuff sort of dissolves paint. It's brilliant. However, it reacts poorly with fine cast. But I've never had it have a problem with resin before. So
I wonder what resin the fine cast are using then, because that's resin cast, isn't it?
well, it's plastic, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure that the fine cast is Citadel's resin line.
So anyway,
maybe I'm wrong.
this chappie went in that stuff. Now normally I cover the stuff in it, the model, whatever it is, in the paint stripper, and leave it overnight. But this, because it was just primer, I left it about an hour, cleaned it up, fine. I washed these in my resin printer IPA bath. So 5 minutes, it's got an agitator in the bottom. I then went and washed those under the tap again, warm soapy water.
So pretty extensive cleaning.
Yeah, reprimed it. Now, some of the models,
And did that work then?
not wholly, some of the models still had little bits that came off, where I've just gone over them with black paint, and it survived. This one, however, the base, and it was quite late at night at this point, so I chucked it in the thing about 11 o'clock at night and went to sleep. And I didn't remember about it until I think it was about 8 in the morning.
So it's been in IPA for...
No, this is the paint stripper.
Oh, the paint stripper.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can see sort of, because I popped it in like that in the paint stripper, and you can see sort of where it absorbed it to. And this resin part the next day was sticky and floppy. Like, I mean, you can see I'm doing that, but I mean, it was very malleable.
Flexible.
Very malleable.
So I would say that there's some chemical in that mix that the resin has absorbed somehow.
So I washed it, again, soapy water, brush jobby, dried it out with my heat gun. It seemed to dry okay, so I've reprimed it, and again, it wouldn't dry. The primer, I left it for, I think it was 4 hours, and it was just still sticky.
Yeah, usually I wait 4 minutes before I start throwing paint on it.
Well, to be fair, I forgot about it in the greenhouse where I prime things. So since then, I have the last time I spoke to Ed about that was then. I resin printed some replacements from Thingiverse, which I've got here in the box. I popped it in my sonic cleaner with washing up liquid and left it in that. No, tell a lie. I left it in Dettol. So here in the UK,
Dettol, really?
yeah, there's a particular Dettol. There's a particular one which neat will strip paint off models. It's not as good as the Eco Strip because it tends to be a bit sticky, so you end up having to scrub harder. But it's more liquidy, so you can get it. I use both. So I left it in that for a few hours, and then I put it in the sonic cleaner. The sonic cleaner, it went for 480 seconds. I don't know what that is in minutes. We warmed.
Well, 300 would be 5 minutes. Does that be 8 minutes?
So that's the maximum it will run for. So I left it in that, and it's not been sticky. Now that was, I think, Wednesday. Today is Saturday for anyone viewing. And this has dried out completely.
This is YouTube. This is a pre-recorded video. We can say whatever day of the week we want.
So this is dried out. It's got a bit of warping. I don't know if you can really see that, but I think that's where I heated it up. It's kind of gone a bit, but it feels dry. So I'm gonna have a crack at priming it again today or tomorrow, hopefully.
Yeah. So whatever chemical, kind of like acetone and ABS, it's soaked in, and then over many days, it's evaporated away.
You can see like surface like skin texture. Look.
Wrinkly.
Yeah, I don't know what. So anyway, I've 3D printed a suitable replacement for this guy. So that'll be one of the tests. Right, I am going to carry on painting this young lady.
Yes. And I'll skip over my models for today, although I will talk about them later. And I will talk about my little story that I have with bases. There's a lot more steps in mine because I've been doing quite a bit of trial and error, and quite a lot of trial and quite a lot of error. So I want to have a wide selection of moulds so that I can just throw some resin in and have 25mm base, 32 base, whatever, just ready to go. And I can use these as dump moulds. So if I'm working with resin and I have a bit extra, I've got somewhere to put it. But also just if I need to churn a bunch through, I can sit there with the 5-minute epoxy and just run them through every kind of 10-15 minutes just to make sure that they don't warp. But for the masters, I resin printed one each of 25, 32 and 40mm base. I thought I'd have some large ones just to have some variety. And I used some silicone to make a mould, as you would expect. However, for some reason, the silicone that I was using stuck to the resin. And it took me hours to pull them out and to clean up the bases again, because I still want to use the master bases for being bases. But because I'd spent so long trying to get them out of the base because everything had stuck, I ended up tearing up all of the molds. So none of the molds worked. One of them nearly worked, and it was for the extra piece that I threw in that wasn't a 3D printed base. It was this. A little Tesco token. Strangely enough, even though this is plastic and not resin printed, the silicone still stuck to this. So I've definitely got an odd batch of silicone that I need to look at. But the mould that this came out of nearly came out right. About half of it came out okay. And so for that half, I poured a little bit of resin in, squidged it up to that side, let it cure, peeled it out, turned it around to fill up where the mould had broken with the cured piece of, or the partly cured piece of resin, and then I poured some more epoxy into the first side again to fill up the rest of the base, and ended up with this. An absolute mess.
Rough.
Of disgusting roughness. And again, I ended up spending quite a long time sanding the outer rim of this to clean it up. Ultimately, that's a bad idea. That took so much effort. I don't want to be spending that much effort with every single base that I want to make. And so, while I was doing all of this and having all of these troubles, Amethyst Quill suggested that I use this.
Plastic.
This is a chocolate packet. Essentially, it's just a vacuum formed bit of plastic with a bunch of compartments that are about the right size. And I thought, you know, if I can pour a little bit of resin into each one, that might actually come out quite well. I wasn't sure how long this would last, and as you can kind of see, it did not last very well at all. So I did some test ones with some 5-minute epoxy resin, and this is the result.
Pretty.
They've gone almost brown, not just yellow, but almost brown. I have never had this. I've used this epoxy hundreds of times, and I've never had this epoxy go this colour instantly.
It's aged 10 years overnight.
But also, notice the shape. Notice how they're all like rolly and
Yeah.
warped. I think what happened here is because this is a 5-minute epoxy, it releases the heat very quickly. So it releases the energy very quickly, which means it heats up quite a lot. This is vacuum formed plastic,
Warped, does it?
which changes shape and becomes stretchy when it gets hot. So I think the resin got hot enough that it softened the plastic, and the plastic kind of warped and caused these wrinkly bumps in it, in the kind of resin pieces that I've made. I still haven't worked out why they've gone yellow. It might be because there's some chemical in the plastic that leached into the resin, or it might just be that it's a bad batch of resin. I don't know. I should probably check that.
It was a 2-part.
Yeah, it's the Poundland 5-minute stuff. So after that, you'll notice in this one there's some epoxy putty this time. So I had some leftover epoxy putty from a different job, and so I squidged it into one of the other compartments here, and this came out relatively well. Now it's a little bit thin, particularly as it's milliput.
Yes.
So this is not very strong. This is probably going to break if you actually try to use it like a normal mini base. But as a proof of concept, it worked. It managed to come out, although it did stick a little bit. So that's a possibility. This is something that Amethyst Quill, she bought this on eBay just to be... actually, no. I think she bought this in Hobbycraft, not on eBay.
I think that was in Hobbycraft when we went
Yes. My memory fails me regularly, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was one or the other. But this is just a generic flower mould. They just happen to be 32 millimeters in diameter. So for the appropriate model, obviously this wouldn't go with every type of model, but for the right type of model, having a stone flower as your base, this would be a very appealing option. However, or rather, in addition, I've been poking around on the old eBay recently, and I've been looking for some different designs, and there are millions of different types of silicone molds, pre-made silicone molds. Generally, they will be stronger than the kind of 2-part silicone that you buy and make your own molds with.
Definitely.
So they're going to last longer, which is a good thing. But I've been trying to find just simple discs that are the right size.
I wonder, so my wife does soap making, and she has silicone molds for that.
Yeah, if she knows a place where you can get a 25mm disc mold.
So, I don't know if you recall, but a few years ago I tried to... I do a lot of FDM printing, as does Ed. So this is FDM.
Oh yeah, my painting handle.
So, you get lots of leftover support material. Use bits and bobs in craft and stuff like that, basing. I wanted to know...
just lots of mechanical random shapes. It works extremely well for Necromunda scenery.
Yes. Yeah. I wanted to know if I could melt some of this down, pour it into molds. So I bought some silicone soap molds. I think they were cat paws.
Of course they were.
But it didn't work very well. It filled the entire house with a noxious smoke that took hours to dissipate.
I suspect you got it. You got the material too hot for too long.
Yeah, basically it sort of boiled a bit. It bubbled.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't get the air bubbles out of the plastic. So I ruined my Poundland frying pan that I bought to do it in.
To do that properly, we'd need a way of controlling the temperature a little better than like on the hob, in a frying pan.
But yeah, it was getting there. So anyway, I've done a bit of playing with this myself, and again, I'm kind of intrigued about wanting to go back to using PLA because you get a lot of it, and it just seems wasteful.
Yeah, I've got bags and bags and bags of this stuff.
Ed's got bags of it in his.
I actually have
Workshop room.
sent some out to the miniature hobbyist a little while ago to do a video on. I've made scenery and terrain myself. I've even used it like bits of failed prints in models, not just scenery, but just having mechanical looking stuff can be handy to have knocking around. But yeah, if we can control the temperature a little better than a frying pan, absolutely I think that's worth looking into again. So, rolling back to a different part of the conversation, the thing that we usually do first is show off the models, and you've shown off some of your models that you've done recently. I recently did a bit of a challenge where I painted a different style of model every single day for 7 days. And so I have here 9 models, because I painted 2 extra ones. But I have the 7 models that I painted each of the days. Just going to show off the different styles that I attempted. Day 1, a Sister of Battle with a fancy, and while we're talking about bases, this base in this particular model is the one that had the hot glue from a previous story about me trying to make bases. That's the one that I tried to make a hot glue mould from, and it ended up plugged up with hot glue.
Let's put some blood for the blood god on that sword.
No, it's good clean. Day 2. Speed painted Gretchen. I tried to avoid doing speed paint for this week-long challenge because it could very easily end up just all being speed paints.
The red's nice. Is that a glossy red? Looks kind of shiny.
The model was spray painted with a gloss primer, kind of like the terracotta we used on the terrain, and I had a lot of trouble getting paint to actually stick to it. But I think that even though I managed to get that red over the top, because the red's satin red. No, the red's actually a gloss red. Never mind, it is a gloss red. So it's a gloss red over a gloss primer. Day 3.
It's Brent.
Is my little Brent from Goober Town Hobbies. They did a I can't remember the company name. I'm going to have to insert that as a annotation.
I can't remember either. I also purchased the STLs for this.
Yes. So in fact, the both of us have bought the STL to print off an endless supply of little Brents, and there is a slightly larger Brent that Paul has printed.
I understand why mine's come out bigger. I don't know what I've done there.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
your printer is scaling things oddly at the moment. I'm going to get the order wrong now. Yeah, this one. I'm pretty sure this is the next day.
Yes.
So this is a 54mm scale Madame Vastra from the Doctor Who series.
I was going to say, is it a Doctor Who model?
It is. There are 2 reasons why I chose this specific model. One of them is because it's a larger model, and so you have to paint proportionally larger details. Any detail that you paint on the model has to be about the same size, because your eye sees the model, sees the features of the model regardless of what scale the model is. So the bigger the model you paint, the smaller proportionally your details need to be, because your details actually need to be physically the same size on the model. I need to come up with a better way of explaining that, because I'm pretty sure that's just confusing everyone. So because this is a slightly larger model than the 32mm models I usually paint, you have to paint in different details. And so over her entire top, I've painted in some, I can't remember what the pattern styling is. It starts with a P, but it's like swirly, lacy, detaily stuff.
Leopard print kind of.
Sort of. And on the sword handle and the scabbard as well, there was just flat, smooth plastic. So I've painted in some wrapping and banding. I've tried to paint in lines in between the red and to break it up, but also to reinforce certain parts of the red so that it looks like it's got stripes of material.
Yeah, like it's got depth.
Yeah. I haven't done very well, I fully admit that. And that's the one thing that I came away with, that even though I kind of understand the concepts of what I needed to do, I actually don't understand how to paint like that yet. And so that's something I want to revisit. Because I think I can do a better job with a little bit of practice and then some more practice, and eventually, after a lot of more practice, I'll probably become passable at it.
Give up.
Give up and do something else, yes. So the next model, and I think this is my favourite of the whole week. So with this model, I decided to do an object source lighting, but rather than just painting the model normally and then adding on object source lighting, I only painted the object source lighting. So it's completely pitch black, except for where the light hits it.
Yes. So while Ed was going through tests of this, he was sending me photos of this. This is the first time I've seen it in person. Yeah, it's beautiful, especially the effect on the gun.
Yeah, on the gun, I actually used a metallic paint for the highlights, but the mid-tone, I wet blended it from the black I was using into a non-metallic grey, and then from the non-metallic grey into the silver, which is a metallic grey.
Just noticed this is on one of the Brent stands.
Yeah, I didn't have another base, so I just used the nearest base there. It adds a nice texture to the darkness rather than being just completely flat. It's under his foot. So that's my favourite of them. The next day, I think this is day 6 or whatever, that's one of the Rec Age models, which I very much enjoy painting.
Oh yeah. So this is, I assume, a post-apocalyptic.
Exactly, yes. I painted myself into the middle of the colour wheel. That's what I'm calling it.
I mean, these would fit really well in the Fallout sort of survival. Have I got one? I haven't got any painted, sadly. these would really fit well.
Oh yeah, because they're 35mm, aren't they?
32 these are.
Oh, I think Rec Age is 28, actually. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yes.
Yeah, those are nice models.
So with this model, I love the set and I'm enjoying painting them, but this specific model, I have the sort of bad habit of painting into brown. So what I mean by that is I paint the skin colour, I paint the armour colour, I paint the metallics, I paint the clothing in various colours, and then I sort of run out of ideas and paint whatever's left in browns. So the boots will be brown, the belts and pouches will be brown, sometimes even some of the clothing will be brown. It depends on the specific model. But brown is the colour that I kind of fill in everything I can't kind of pick the right colours for beforehand. But for this model, I started by painting the duster coat brown.
That kind of forced you.
And it threw me off, and I couldn't, I tried different colours in different places, but I just couldn't get back into to painting the rest of the model. And it's kind of a shame, but it's a mental problem, I think. Because it's such a different style to what I'm used to. Like adding colours to brown rather than adding brown to colours. It's odd that I had so much trouble, and I didn't expect to have that much trouble with that.
Well, just to fill you in on my painting here,
How are you getting on?
Really uncomfortable with this.
How are you, like, the between the two cheap brushes, which one's your least favourite and most favourite?
They're both terrible.
They're just both terrible. The brush that you're painting with at the moment, with the blue tape on it, that is the brush that I painted with, like, the most. I painted more models with that brush than any other brush in my life. So I'm surprised I stuck with mini painting, given how horrible that paintbrush is.
I think it's one of those things that if you've not used a better brush, you wouldn't know.
Yeah, I guess that's it. I didn't notice it until I went back to that brush. Back to the brush. So when I was painting with that brush, I didn't know any better. I didn't understand the differences between brushes, and so
I mean, all my paintbrushes are either Citadel or Army Painter. And again, that's only because I don't really know any better. But I think I just probably dropped on by good measure.
Mm.
Good by good luck rather than.
I mean, you've gone for the brand name stuff, Citadel, Army Painter.
Well, I mean,
whereas I've gone for whatever's cheapest in a pack at Hobbycraft.
When I started playing again, I basically purchased the starter painting set. So it came with whatever the starter brush is. I think there's a starter brush. I haven't got it with me of its own, like a Citadel starter brush and a selection of paints. I think it came with an intercessor.
Even though I very much dislike Citadel's various styles of stuff, particularly their paint pots, for a new painter, for someone joining the hobby, the Citadel starter sets are possibly the best starting point. They might not be the best paints and they might not be the best brushes, but it's so easy to get hold of and it's so easy to get started that it sort of is kind of the best place to start from.
Well, to be fair, this is the same part of McCraig Blue I've had since I started.
Yeah, because you never use it.
I never use it. Look at it, it's nearly full.
Yeah.
I mixed it with some white there to make that blue for a top.
So to round it out, my 7th and final model for the week
It's a Groot.
This is FDM printed. This is not resin printed. So it's FDM printed and then smoothed with.
Oh, this is vapor smoothing.
No, this isn't vapor smoothing. This is just me with a brush painting on some solvent weld.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've done that.
It works. You can still see the ley lines, but it's fine.
It's a tree, so
Yeah.
It's a flat bark.
But the reason why I painted this one for the last day is I wasn't feeling very well, and I did not feel up to painting like 5 hours of the Battle Sister took 5 hours. Some of the others took 2, 3, 4 hours. Obviously, the Grot took like 30 minutes. But I wasn't up to spending that length of time on a model, and so I picked what's the easiest one to paint, and I saw that in the corner. I didn't want to paint it, but I just wanted to paint something. Kind of not necessarily to force myself to paint, but just to allow myself to paint something that day, whereas otherwise I wouldn't have. And so I got that model done. I painted it dark brown, I dry brushed it light brown, I dry brushed it yellow, and then I gave it a wash, and that was it. That's all it took.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to put a bit of green in there.
Yeah, I could add some greenery. I've got some... there's a really nice way of doing moss, actually.
Well, the green I'm painting with currently is what I was thinking. Just dots of that. If I hold that against there,
I will show a model, a bit of scenery I painted a while back of a standing stone, which everyone says is mud because I painted it brown rather than grey. Stones can be other colours, but I did moss by mixing PVA and baking powder.
Okay.
And mixing in green paint into the mix. So as it dries, you get white, like splotchy white bits.
Okay.
And it looked pretty good as moss. I'm pretty happy with that, how that came out for that specific function. So going back with some of that and just dotting it in and maybe putting some of the flowers from the, Gamer's Grass?
Yes.
Something like that, just an individual flower in there.
Yeah, now I quite liked your, with the Gamer Glass flowers where you broke them up for, was it this one? Yeah, this model.
Yeah.
We'll put a link to the video where Ed
Link
did
to the
this.
video. That is my challenge versus the miniature hobbyist to paint to make a diorama.
So what Ed did was he obviously bought clumps of flowers and then he cut them down into tinier bits of flowers.
It's quite difficult to do with those because of how they're made. I suspect that the way they do it is they they do static grass to make the stems, and then they dip the tips in glue and then dip the tips in the flower petals.
That makes sense.
But what that means is that the flower petals are often stuck to more than one stem. And so when you come down and try and separate it out with the knife, it's very difficult to do it without breaking the stems apart and having them sticking up in odd and kind of weird ways. I think I managed it on that quite well. I did the same thing for the Tanith First and Only, and it didn't come out quite so well for them. During my 7 days, I actually painted some extra models. And this is one of those things where you have the paints out, you're painting, you finish one model, and that's all you needed to do. That's all you wanted to do. But you're still in the mood to paint, and you still want to paint something else. And so I picked out 2 models that I painted over the week. And the first one, which I think you've seen before, but you haven't seen it painted.
No, I saw when you'd made it.
Yeah. So this is the servo skull that I made from the cherubim from the Battle Sisters Retributor Squad. To have just cut the skull head off and then suspend that from a pin, and that becomes a fairly nice servo skull.
Is it a pin like a knitting pin?
It's a dressmaking pin.
Yeah, that's the word.
I've got probably like 1,000 dressmaking pins.
The base that looks like a shield or something.
So I'm pretty sure that circular thing is actually from the old style rhinos.
Okay.
It's the wheel, or it's the inner mechanism of the tracks. The bit with the cross on it, that's a metal pewter model sprue.
Okay.
It's got a cross on it because that's the bit you cut off. It's not part of the model. But it makes perfectly good rubble and broken stuff. The final one, which I've left for last because it's the funniest, particularly for Paul, is I have a 3D printed goose. Now I've done a goose before, but I wanted to do the second goose because this is the Grimdark goose.
Oh yes, yeah, I have seen it.
Which has a Space Marine shoulder pad as its back armour, and it's got a bionic eye, and it's got bionic throat thing, and it's got bionic leg. So it's got all these augments and stuff. It looks very, very 40k and grimdark.
And then you put it on a square base. Oh, you did it in Hawk Lords.
And I did it as a Goose Lord.
So I play Hawk Lords as my Space Marine army. So they're purple, and they have a gold and eagle on the pauldron. Again, close up. I haven't got any with me. I only bought the Fallout model.
I guess it's a hawk, not an eagle.
Well, it's an eagle in the.
Is the shoulder pad an eagle, even though they're the Hawk Lords?
Yeah, I believe so. Because it's the.
That's weird.
They share the same. They share the same iconography as. Oh, I can't think of the other ones. They're black with the white, and it's the same logo. Very professionally looked up.
Are they also hawks? Something?
No. Incidentally, I have actually bought a set of these Forge World ones. I bought them second hand off Manchester Nerfer, a friend of the channel. His friend selling two of these. Raven Guard. Yeah. So Hawk Lords share the same.
So that's a picture of a hawk and a raven. I tell you, hawk and a raven are closer than. That's got 2 heads.
It's got 1 head.
Oh yeah, of course it has. Sorry. Ravens and hawks are closer to get to each other than either of them are to eagles, in terms of their look.
Eagle!
However, when I painted this shoulder pad, I made very specific effort with the head to make it as goose-shaped as possible. It's not that goose-shaped. I didn't do a particularly good job.
It's definitely goose.
But it's a goose-shaped head because it's the Goose Lords. And in comparison, there is...
Not more goose band.
This one was printed on the FDM machine. So the normal goose
is this one resin, is it?
Yeah. So the normal goose is FDM printed and solvent smoothed, and the Grimdark goose, the Goose Lord, is resin printed.
I mean, there's not much in the way of the body. The head looks a bit rough, though, doesn't it? Comparatively to the to the resin.
They both look a bit rough, to be honest.
Well, I mean, that one ain't even got an eye, it's just got a bit of Borg.
Yeah.
It's one of three.
Although, on both models, the legs broke. If you notice on this one, I've actually left the support material in there.
Oh, yeah. Hold him up.
On this one, obviously there's different support material for resin. There's no support material there, so it's just a glob of super glue on the bionic leg that's then painted silver. Hopefully that'll hold.
Well, you'll be able to use that resin stuff I bought you. So I bought Ed some 5-second fix, I think they call it. Like, it's a UV curing resin glue. It's like kind of jelly, and it comes with a little UV torch. Rubbish, but if you use a proper UV torch, it dries in seconds. I use it to fill gaps and whatnot on lots of things.
Yeah.
And I said ages ago I'd bring Ed some down, and I keep forgetting, so I bought some.
Well, not only have I got the resin for the resin printer, which is a UV cured resin, but I have a bottle of some form of UV resin that doesn't cure, ever. No matter how much UV light you throw at it, it just doesn't do anything. So I suspect that I need to mix the bottle significantly more than I have been doing. Not just shake it, but stir it.
Yeah, I mean, I bought one from RS Components, and it was a flexible resin, and it turns out it's for a different kind of resin printer. So I got lumps out of it, but it was like rubber. And honestly, if it had worked, it would be absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Because you could use it to make
Is there no way you could change the intensity settings or?
I think it's the way that the wave of the UV light, the frequency, is that the right word?
Oh, the wavelength.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
Well, does it work with the torch?
Well, I guess it might do, but then you're just going to end up with a bit of rubber.
Yeah. Get a mould.
But yeah, we could make a mold.
Yeah, you use some. I wonder if it would stick to silicon though, because it's a more rubbery material.
Oh, fantastic.
This is something that you'll have to try. Oh, I'll tell you what. Here's another idea. Talking about a different hobby that we're both involved in. Paint it on a Nerf grip and then cure it.
Oh, yeah, mate.
To make a rubberized kind of speed grip tape kind of thing. I wonder how well that would work. It might not work. I mean, it might work. It's worth a try.
So my other project, and this is a bit more modelling really. So as we mentioned previously, I play Hawklords. Hawklords, their chapter fluff is that they're pilots, and a lot of their Marines are sought after by other chapters to be pilots for ships and such like. So part of the fluff is that they don't tend to use drop pods. They will prefer to fly in using a storm talent or stuff like that. Now, I recently purchased the new 9th edition, the bunker. What's it called? Firestorm bunker? Firestorm.
Yes.
Yeah, I've shown it in a previous episode. And I'm sure I've discussed how I was disappointed by its rules.
Yeah, because it's not a drop pod thing. It's just a building.
Yeah, it's a building
that starts the game wherever it ends up.
So what I was hoping for was a deployable, missile battery. I want to be able to take an objective and go, right, I'm going to defend that by deploying this thing and then move on.
Yeah, dumping something on it and then moving your infantry onto something else.
So with those rules obviously not being the same, so I moved on. Now, over at Forge World, they have a drop pod that has missiles inside of it. I can't afford to spend that much money. What I can afford to purchase is this drop pod, which I paid £12 off of Facebook Marketplace.
Not bad.
And then I sat and remixed some other people's work and came up with my own internals to make it into a missile. So these were turret design that someone had done with 6, and I obviously just increased that to 10 and made it bigger. I then designed a top piece with what I'm calling an umbilical, which is wires then going into the back of the missiles. Unfortunately, when I actually come to build it, you can't really see them, which is a bit disappointing because I put a lot of effort into that. But yeah,
I mean, the wires do look good. It's just you can't see them.
Yeah, they're going into the back of each of the pods. So yeah, I've been working on that quite a bit. As I say, so I should be able to play the rules of that missile drop pod. And
Yeah,
other than that,
and that's then going to behave like you want it to.
Yeah, I'm going to be able to deploy that behind enemy lines and whatnot. The other thing I've been working on is some terrain. So I purchased on Amazon some resin terrain buildings, which were like rubberized. They're quite cool because they came with little windows. Rubberized. Blown up.
Rubberized.
Now, I didn't bring them with me to Ed's house this weekend because limited space. So what I've done is I took photos on my phone, which I've sent Ed, and then what we'll do is we'll throw the pictures up on the screen now. As
every time you say we're going to show you some pictures, I edit that out because I'm showing them the pictures so they know that there's pictures.
You know there's pictures. There'll be one in there of me in my bikini.
God, I hope not. I don't want to have to see that and edit it.
So, the one building in this set is like a T-shape. So, we've seen that. So, I've gone ahead and printed some of the official Fallout scenery. So, they sell... Not only do they sell, like, this model here in particular, you can only get that if you buy the STLs and print it yourself. They also sell official terrain pieces. So I've obviously stuck in like consoles and computers and lockers and stuff like that that make it distinctly Fallout. So these buildings, I've put like a safe in there. The photos that you're looking at they're not finished yet, but particularly the ground at the minute, it's only brown with like a light dry brush. But there's like gutter pipes and things I've done a rust effect on, so I'm quite pleased with those. So my friend Anglecat, which is Foxy Mitts, who we mentioned before's husband, we are planning, the three of us, to play Fallout a little bit further into the new year. So we'll have 3 factions. So what we're hoping to do is I want to knock together some terrain. So I've printed, excuse me one second, it's under the table. Oh. I've printed, so I've printed these. This is the first one of many.
So is that one of the official ones?
No, so this is a shanty town.
Just a generic.
Yeah. So the person that's designed these and put them on Thingiverse has done several different designs. They're all just shacks that they fit the Fallout narrative. I mean, there's like a number pad thing, like an electronic number pad on that door. So it clearly isn't set in current day. But I don't know. And it's got tyres and bits and bobs. So my plan is to knock out some of these. This is on like 0.2 layer height, so that's like draft.
Yeah, that's nasty quality. What is the minimum layer height your printer can handle? Your FDM
0.6 is the minimum it suggests, but I imagine it probably
0.6 or 0.06?
0.6. Right. So the plan is to do several of these and fill a game board alongside some of the official stuff. So in the Fallout 4 computer game, there's a petrol station called Red Rocket. So we've bought the STLs for that, which is obviously a really big one. So I've got to print lots lots of printing to do on that one, but that will be the main focal point of the table. Alongside some of the small huts and stuff for us to play around. As obviously I've discussed, I'm going to be playing Enclave. Englecat is playing Brotherhood of Steel, and Foxy Bits is going to be playing as the Institute.
And I am not invited.
He's not invited.
I live the other side of the universe.
3.5 hours away.
Yeah. Anyone in the South Midlands wants to play literally any game. But now that we've mentioned Engel and Foxy Mitts yet again, we have to mention the Ordo Redactus, which we have some messages from today, because the two of those seems to be having quite a lot of fun poking holes in everything I say.
Only stuff that Ed says.
Yeah, only stuff that I say. Because apparently everything Paul says is gold. And so I can bring out, for the first time ever,
yay!
The Inquisitorial Rosette for the Ordo Redactus. I will be having a video on this published the 1st of January 2021, which is soon. I'm not entirely sure when this video will be going up, the podcast, because, well, I haven't actually got that far to editing it yet.
No, if you finish recording it.
Yeah, whenever. It will be sometime at the end of December like normal. We might put it a bit early so that it's before Christmas, cough cough. But, Ordo Redactus, we have a rosette, and we also have some messages for the Ordo Redactus. There are so many that I've written them down. Number 1 from Engelcat is, in episode 2, I said that you very rarely, or maybe even never, see forklift trucks with tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a forklift truck model that has tracks because it's cool and Necromunda and 40k and that's the kind of thing. But in reality, you very rarely see forklift trucks with tracks because they work usually indoors or in flat, working in areas that even outdoors. Engelcat says that there is one advantage to having tracks that means that you might see tracks on a forklift truck. And that is, for very tight spaces, with a tracked vehicle you can turn on the spot, whereas you can't with wheels. However, I contend that message with a counter message that if the environment was so small that you couldn't fit a forklift truck with wheels in, and you wanted to go to the extra complexity of having tracks, you'd just use a pump truck. Realistically.
It's that small that you can't get a forklift in. You're not going to be getting pallets in, are you, really?
You can still get pallets in with a pump truck in places you can't get in with a forklift truck. However, my point is that the complexity, the cost, the maintenance, and the unreliability of tracks in comparison to wheels is such that you wouldn't. I'm not saying that no one ever has. I'm sure there are tracked forklift trucks in operation, but the benefits do not outweigh the cost, literally the financial cost of maintaining them and the difficulty of use.
I want Engelcat to send in at least 3 different examples.
Yes, you have homework for next episode. Also from Engelcat is actually a confirmation that I was correct for once. We mentioned some Imperial Guard vehicles, and there is a variant of the Chimera hull that has a flamethrower. I called it a Hellhound, but I wasn't sure. It in fact is a Hellhound. I was correct.
Awesome.
We also had a message from Foxy Mitts. Last episode we were talking about TV series, and I was talking about a detective series where there's a dead person who came back as a zombie to help solve crimes. That is called iZombie.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
I thought it was Randall and Hopkirk deceased, because that's the same sort of thing.
I wonder if they're like spiritually related, like spiritual successor sort of thing, whether there's any. I shouldn't use the term spiritually spiritual successor when we're talking about dead things and zombies. Excuse me while I grab myself a drink.
I'm going to try and do the face now. Just one tip sharing that.
Paul is now reaching the most difficult part of this model.
This is the brush I normally use to do lips and eyes, and this is the brush I'm trying to use, which doesn't even look at it. Look at it.
I've said many times the size of the brush. You actually want a larger brush, no matter what you're painting, but you want a very, very sharp point. This brush comes to a okay point. It's not great and it's not good enough really for faces. Right, we have one last message from the Order Redactus. This message comes from I have no idea. The information on who this came from has been redacted from me somehow. I can't remember. But I can't find the message either, but someone was complaining that I misrepresented model railway scales. So Paul, over this episode, has been painting some model railway models that I got, and they are O gauge.
Ooh.
Now, in the last episode, I said that O gauge was something like 1 to 35, 1 to 38. That is incorrect. I have a list here. So, according to the NEM, which is kind of European standard for model railways, O gauge is 1 to 45. Not 1 to 35. That's a very big difference between 1 to 35 and 1 to 45.
Yeah.
According to the Japanese, we have O and OJ, which are both 1 to 45 scale. We also have live steam O gauge, which is again 1 to 45.
What? Why? Why are they all called O gauge and then different?
Well, they're from different standards around the world.
Working in IT, as I always say, the best thing about standards
is
there's
not
so many to choose from.
So many to choose from, yeah. So we also have the NMRA, which has...
I NRA, but I was going to say, well, they've got a standard for trains, have they?
The National Rifle Association, yeah. No, the NMRA, which has ON2, ON3 and ON30, or ON30, I'm not sure, which is 1 to 48. So not 1 to 45, this is 1 to 48, and it's different, just because it can be different. And then, of course, we have the British standard for model railways, and both O and O14 are 1 to 43.5.
0.5, nice.
Therefore, O gauge as a whole, the tracks are all compatible with each other, but the scales range from 1 to 43.5 to 1 to 48. And so when I bought these models, they are listed as O gauge 1 to 50.
Yay!
Yes, they're 1 to 50 scale, they're at 36 millimeters. They're listed as 1.5 inch, but they're not quite. But in 1 to 50 scale, that would put them at about 1.9 meters. At 1 to 45 scale, it puts them closer to 1.8. It's an average human, like European human height, perfectly reasonable 1 to 50 scale. 1 to 45, 1 to 48, doesn't really matter. They're close enough that you kind of get away with it. It's not perfectly accurate, but it's close enough. In comparison to a 32mm model, as we've mentioned last week, they are about the same height, maybe a little bit taller, but very, very spindly.
What's really annoying is there's bits of detail on here I want to paint, but I just cannot.
I can see from here that you've done a better job painting that than I did when I painted the 3 that I painted with that same brush.
So, on a sub point, I've said before, I think that I sometimes get better results than Ed because I have more paint options, which is why I bought a lot of my paints with me today.
Paul has too many paints. He doesn't understand how to mix paints. He thinks that having more paints makes him a better painter.
I don't. I'm just saying, I think I get better results sometimes.
Practice makes you a better painter. You paint a lot more than me. How many models have you painted this year?
Oh my god, this woman's eye. Look at it. It's on her nose.
Amazing. Yes.
I keep going over it and just making it worse.
Oh yeah, and using washes. Obviously a proper painter would never use a wash.
Tough.
The fact that I'm literally using a wash, as you say.
Hello.
Wash is a tool in the toolbox that you should pull out every now and again because it can be useful. It's a very imprecise tool, and so you end up getting paint where you don't necessarily want it, and you have to go back and clean it up, or just accept that it's not perfect. It's a very quick tool, so for speed paints and that kind of stuff, for painting large units. If you're painting an entire army very quickly, absolutely useful tool to use. But I want to be painting things as nice as I possibly can.
Yeah, she's just going to have to make do with the wonky eyes. No pupils, wonky eyes.
Wonky eyes, yes. The horror of Paddington Station.
Well, she'll be wambling through, so... I think what I'll do is I'll call that one done and move on to the other one.
Yes.
To get the brush.
So just to interject the next day, because we forgot to talk about the models that we were painting during our podcast, so we'll just squeeze this little bit in at the end. My Knolls have not come along all that far. I've painted most of the clothing in a dark green. Haven't done any highlights on that yet. And I've painted the skin, well, fur rather. I've painted the kind of very hairy parts in a slightly darker brown.
Yeah.
And then I've put tan over the top as highlights. And then over the rest of the fur, I've started just with a tan. And I'll put higher highlights over that. I've also done a brown wash over the fur, over all of the fur, to try and give it some definition. Which has worked quite well. But I need to come back and do some highlights over the top. More interestingly, however, is how you got on, because you had the little challenge going.
Yeah, I mean, it was painful. So, first of all, as had discussed in the last video, there is not a lot of detail, going on in these models. So, it's trying to put it in itself. So, using the two...
There are some details here, like there's the line of the shoes is there.
Yes.
The handbag is an outline with kind of a crease in it, and there are some folds in the clothes, but yeah, in comparison to what we're used to, which is the kind of oversaturation of detail, almost too much detail in some cases, that you could spend 30 or 40 hours just filling in details.
So like the bag, I did a dark brown, and then I did highlights in a lighter brown over the top, which I then sort of smudged a bit with my finger because the brush was just awful. I was hoping to try and get an effect like that. No, I'm not happy with that. So this is the one I did with the
cheap brushes.
The off-the-shelf brushes.
Just for reference, one of the brushes has no markings at all, and the other one simply says Royal Fine Sable. Size 0. It's actually bigger than a lot of the size 0s from other companies, but as we've discussed, the sizing of brushes is lies. Lies?
Well, there's
just
no
lies.
standard. There's no agreed standard.
But it says Royal Fine Sable, so it's a sable hairbrush, or at least you'd think it is if it's got that written on the side.
So, the hair, I did ginger, so I did obviously a bright orange, and then highlights in yellow. Again, it was rough. I tried to improve things by putting a brown wash on the end of it at the end, but I think that just made things worse, to be honest.
Can you describe why painting with these brushes was bad?
Well, this one.
Not just that they were bad, but why they were bad.
Because when you go to brush something, instead of it holding its shape, it just bends off. It's not doing it now because it's dry, but it just bent off. So I'm not going to do it now. It's typical. They were so literally you would go to touch it like that, and instead of it doing like that, like you would expect, the bristles did that. Look, they're curving off. So then it's sort of you're dragging it behind where you're trying to paint.
I've heard some YouTubers refer to that as snap in the brush. The strength or rigidity of the bristles to point forwards rather than all point to the side.
This one I'll do.
And this small one, was that the same in that it kind of...
It was easier to work with just because it was easier to control because there was less of it going everywhere. But again, it did that.
Also, I think this one comes to a slightly sharper tip than the
Yeah.
than the black handle one.
But it's certainly not what I'm used to painting with nowadays. I mean, I do have some cheap brushes which I use to apply like the basing material.
Like technicals.
The paints that have got like sand and stuff in, because I'm not going to use my good brushes for that. So I'm kind of, I can tell on those they're pretty rough. They're worse than these, considerably worse than these. But I say I only use it for that and painting plaster weld onto PLA parts. So
the plastic weld, yes.
The second model, I wanted to paint them both identical. Purely so it made a nicer comparison for the photo.
Yeah.
So the face is a way better. I use the skin tone.
So yeah, this is now with the Raphael.
Yeah, the Raphael. Yeah, the skin tone. I did. So I'm used to painting. Like so, I do so Warhammer 40k models and like Fallout. So my technique for skin is normally to pick one of the. I have three sort of colours I work around with. So a very pale white skin, like my own, like an olive. So sort of
IT technician skin tone.
Yeah. An olive skin tone, and then a dark brown, and then I use different shades to make obviously a black skin tone.
Yeah, so different washes.
And then I normally put a wash on these to give them the sort of grim dark appeal, which I've done on these, but I don't think it really works on this because it's supposed to be a modern day lady at a train station. So I think if I did it again, I wouldn't do the wash on the skin. I think I'd have gone with the olive and then highlighted with the lighter, paler one and left it at that. That being said, I mean, the face is a lot better. I mean, the eyes on this one are all...
Yeah, with the cheap brushes, the eyes are completely uneven. They're different sizes.
I'm quite happy with the pink I did on the lips on both of them. It obviously looks better on the one with a finer brush. In terms of the detailing on this one, I managed to actually get the strap of the purse, which I didn't on that one, and I managed to do the belt, and I did the belt buckle and a little bit of metallic. I can't actually tell what colour that is. It's a silver metallic. The hair, again, I did the wash on this just to make it consistent with that one, but again, I don't know. I should have just stopped with the yellow. But I'd made the mistake on the first one, and I wanted them to be the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I did a better job of a bit of blue on her arms.
Certainly between both of them, it was a kind of rushed speed paint in both cases, but the brush control, the cleanliness of the second one is so much better than the first. The application of paint is smoother and more consistent, and
I think I did really
you're
well
able to go in
like
for smaller details.
Yeah, these ladies are off to the horrific world of Fallout.
They'll be on a train station in Fallout, yes, and they'll probably get eaten by rad roaches.
Yeah, well, they're going to do something in there because the scale's quite close.
I mean, it looks 1950s, so it fits in with the Fallout theme, but it's not like she's not armed and armoured, so she's not a combatant, and she's still got a handbag. That's not the kind of thing that people carry in the wasteland. So perhaps you could do a diorama of a ruined shopping centre, and you could have this as a mannequin.
Yeah, I think that would work quite well.
That would be an interesting thing. Or you could do it as a train station and have a character like that.
If there's two of them, I can have one mannequin upright and then one mannequin perhaps break it at the legs and then make it look like it's fallen over.
Yeah, that could work. There are things you could do there.
I heard she doesn't even have a job. She just goes to the train station to creep people out.
What a better reason to go to a train station. Anyway, there's my collection of, and just for fun and for dioramas and stuff.
Oh, thank you.
There's a whole bunch for you.
Yeah, I found these on Amazon last night.
Yeah. How much are they now?
$7.99.
Oh, they've gone up in price. They've doubled in price.
But the photos weren't very good. They look like anamorphic blobs. I look forward
Anyway.
to blowing them up.
I did put some of these these models in a vat of goo, and then I poured some more goo over the top, like water effect resin mixed in with green paint. And I put too much green paint in the last layer, so you can't see them anymore.
Oh, that's a shame.
Anyway,
But we know they're there.
now that we've discussed those things that we forgot to discuss when we did the primary recording, we will pass you back to the primary recording for the outro. So, thank you very much for watching us, listening to us rambling on while we paint some models. And
it was nice to sit down and do some painting while we're talking.
Yes, we should do it this way more often. Unfortunately, because of certain restrictions, we can't see each other as often as we'd like.
No.
Not least the fact that we live 1,000,000 miles apart from each other.
1,000,000 billion miles.
Approximately, roughly. To the nearest million billion. Rounding up.
An hour and a half if you're in a car.
Yeah, okay, fine. It's not that far away. But all the Americans are like, wow, that's just next door. This has been the Back to the Brush podcast. I am Edgar.
I'm Alan.
Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Stitch.
Oh yeah, and Stitch as well.
Yeah.
Right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. So we're just going to do just the B-roll of this painting, yeah?
No, this is the podcast.
Do we need to record the talking, or are we just going to start painting?
We talk while we paint.
So am I going to introduce what I'm doing?
At some point during the podcast, we'll talk about it.
That's what I mean. We ain't doing it now.
No, we're doing it now. This is the podcast.
Am I going to say? So after the last issue.
We start by saying, "Hi, I'm Edgar,
And I'm Paul Allen.
and welcome back to the brush for the December special episode." And